Welcome. This edition of Developmental Supervision, we're going to talk about the topic of task analysis. Task analysis is something that we all use every day in our life. For instance, Saturday morning around the Sherman household is honeydew time. Typically, my wife will make a list of activities that she would like me to complete on Saturday morning. Activities such as run to the post office, pick up the cleaning, run by the grocery store. And so there's a number of activities that she would like me to do on her honeydew list. And so as she gives me my Saturday morning honeydew list, the first thing I think about is what is the most efficient way to accomplish these tasks? Is it to go to the furthest point first and work my way back towards the house? Is it based on when things open and when things are accessible? Irrespective of the approach that I take, I engage in a task analysis. Another example of task analysis that we all use quite frequently is that of packing a suitcase. If you're going away for the weekend and you have to pack a suitcase, then the first thing that you're probably going to think about is what activities are you going to be engaged in that activity so that you can pack the appropriate clothing. For instance, the Sherman household, it's not unusual, or it wasn't unusual, to go to soccer tournaments. And so at soccer tournaments, you would be thinking, well, I'm going to be outside in the hot sun, and so I want to pack appropriately for 2 days. But invariably, we would go out for dinner on Saturday night as part of the soccer tournament with the team. So I need to dress appropriately for that. And if the occasion arose, we would try to make church on Sunday morning. And so I would need to make sure that I packed appropriate church clothing. But making those decisions as to what needs to be packed for a weekend trip, you are engaging in a task analysis. So as you can see, we all use task analysis all the time in our everyday lives. It is also an instructional tool that we can use as teachers. So here's the definition of task analysis. Let me read it to you. It's a strategic planning tool designed to allow the teacher to identify and sequence the component parts, which are the sub-skills needed to achieve an objective. When should we use task analysis? Well, as a classroom teacher, we would want to use task analysis whenever we're teaching something for the first time. If we're teaching a lesson that we've never taught before, then we want to apply our task analysis skills. As an administrator, we would want to understand task analysis and be able to utilize that skill when we've observed a teacher who has not been successful in that instructional segment. So we would want to try to analyze why that teacher was not successful, and we would want to use our task analysis skills to accomplish that. So my objective for this session for you is that you will be able to complete a task analysis of a Texas Essential Knowledge and Skill as a result of this session. Now, let me start off with the holistic. There are 4 steps in a task analysis of an objective. The first is to identify the objective, then brainstorm the sub-skills that are necessary to accomplish that objective. The third is to determine the baseline. And what we're really determining there is where do we begin instruction, and then finally to sequence the sub-skills in the logical order in which you want to teach them. So let's take a second and look at an example of a task analysis. Step 1. Identify the objective. Here's an objective. The learner will write a complete sentence with correct punctuation. Let's see if we can find the 4 parts to this objective. The audience. The audience is the learner. The action verb. What will the learner do? The learner will write. The direct object. What will the learner write? A sentence. And the criteria, it needs to be a complete sentence with correct punctuation. Now, This is what I like to refer to as the universal objective. The reason it's the universal objective is because we begin to teach this objectives to students in kindergarten. We had kindergarten teachers here. We'd ask them and they would assure us that they begin to teach children as early as 5 how to write a complete sentence. But many youngsters are still working on that skill throughout elementary school. We had middle school teachers here. I suspect a few middle school teachers would say that they're still working with youngsters on how to write a complete sentence. Yes, if we had high school teachers present, I think there were some high school teachers that'll tell you they're still working with youngsters on how to express themselves in a complete sentence. And I'm told by our English department that even some undergraduates are still struggling with writing a complete sentence. And lo and behold, even a few of our graduate students have a hard time expressing themselves in a complete sentence. Hence, I like to think of this as the universal objective. We start on it in kindergarten, and for many, we work on it throughout their entire academic career. Once we've identified the objective, step 2 is to brainstorm the sub-skills, to identify all of the sub-skills that are necessary to accomplish that objective. What happens if we leave out a sub-skill? Well, there is a gap in the student's learning and they will not be successful. So let's brainstorm the sub-skills that are necessary to accomplish our objective of writing a complete sentence with correct punctuation. First of all, youngsters would need to identify a predicate, be able to identify the subject, recognize that a sentence starts with a capital letter, ends with a punctuation mark, that a sentence is a complete thought, and that a sentence is made up of words. What happens, for instance, if we forget to teach youngsters that a sentence starts with a capital letter? Well, many youngsters will be writing sentences that don't start with a capital letter, and of course that's not appropriate unless you're E.E. Cummings, and we're not creating poets just yet. So, it is imperative that we include all of the sub-skills that are necessary to accomplish the objective. That's step 2. After we've identified our objective, brainstorm the sub-skills, the next step is to identify the baseline. And that's a little tricky. What we mean by identifying the baseline is determining which of the sub-skills the youngsters already possess and which of the sub-skills that we need to teach. Now obviously it's a function of the grade level and discipline that we're teaching. For instance, in our little example of writing a complete sentence with correct punctuation, if we were working with 3rd graders, the baseline might be different than if we were working with kindergartners. So we're going to assume, for the sake of this example, that we're working with a group of 3rd graders, and that group of 3rd graders understands that a sentence is made up of words. And therefore, we do not need to teach that particular sub-skill. It falls below the baseline. The baseline is the starting point. The skills that are above the baseline are the skills that we are going to teach. So now we've identified what falls below the baseline or what the students already know. So the last step in the task analysis is to sequence the sub-skills. And by that we mean put them in the order in which you will teach them. Now, you and I may differ a little bit on what we perceive to be the logical order. But irrespective of what you feel is the logical order, that's the order in which you are going to teach the sub-skills. So for instance, in our little example, I'm going to teach the youngsters that a sentence is a complete thought, that it's made up of a subject and a predicate. I want to teach them what is a subject, what is a predicate, that it starts with a capital letter and ends with a punctuation mark. Now you might feel that I would like to start with capital letters. So that would be the logical order for you, and that would be first. That's fine. As long as the sub-skills are independent, then you